And we are live. Good day, everyone. Good day, America. I am Dana, the Angry Citizen, coming to you today live on Friday, August 22nd. It is a little bit after 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I am joined by a very important guest. I'm really excited to have him on for an interview, and we're going to be delving into some very volatile issues regarding the state of California. I personally have a great fondness for the state of California. Spent a good deal of my childhood there in Santa Barbara, Pasadena, Santa Monica areas, and I have been absolutely incensed at the incredible fraud, waste, and corruption by the government of California, and specifically by the man I consider a sheer traitor, that is Gavin Newsome, an abomination of a governor. And I do not believe that Gavin Newsome was legitimately elected. I believe there was election fraud that put him in that office. And the facts and data back me up on that. If you haven't looked into it, check out the documentary known as 2000 Mules. And you will see the voter fraud, election fraud in play that cannot be denied. So I encountered this man just kind of by chance a while back. And immediately I went to his website. I checked out his message. Like the guy just instantly. He seems to be saying the right things that I want to hear, and I believe he means what he says. And I'm going to show you right now his website, and you can find out anything you want to know about him. He is a Marine Corp veteran, and I believe a strong patriot. And our conversations so far have been very encouraging to me. He has my full support, and we're going to bring him on now, give him a chance to address America and answer any questions. If you have questions, post them in the chat. Be happy to look at them. So welcome to the show, David Serpa. David, good to see you.
Hey, good afternoon, Dana. It's good to see you. Happy Friday.
Thank you. It's been quite an eventful day for me, and as you know, I've been having some technical issues. We were supposed to do this yesterday, but as is often the case, my computer equipment started to malfunction at exactly the moment that I was supposed to do this cast, which of course leads me to believe that it is important and needs to be done. So let's start out with, I guess, the most sort of obvious question would be, at what point did you decide that you were going to step up and run for governor? And I want to say to those who do not understand, running for governor is no small thing. It's not an easy thing to get on the ballot in any state. You have to really work at it. And it is a time-consuming, tedious task, and California is a big state. So this is a huge thing that you've undertaken. What caused you to do that, and what was your first step into this venue?
So it's been a long road, the decision to run for governor. It certainly was not something that came by lightly. I had a lot of people asking me to run for governor pretty much as soon as the last campaign ended, my congressional campaign ended, and I needed some time to kind of take a break. But long story short, what I wanted to do originally was I really wanted to build an executive branch. I really wanted to treat California like a business, come in, create an administration that Californians can be proud of across the board, not just Republicans, but human beings, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians. Good governance helps everyone. A rising tide lifts all boats. And so I'm a policy guy. I'm a history guy. And throughout the last several years, I've been looking back at history. I've had my own journey through, war and through combat, and coming back from that and realizing that it's not always what we sell people. And so that sort of, we always talk about what radicalized you. I've always been a pretty radical guy. And so the decision to run for governor, it's been a long time coming. Went on an RV trip with my kids. We saw sort of the devastation of the state in contrast with some of the really beautiful things about California. And that's where a lot of people get lost. That's where a lot of the complaining gets lost. And so I've been working at this, long story short, since January. Originally, I was going to run for lieutenant governor, but I decided to shift my focus to governor after a collaboration didn't work out, because I really want to do what, and this isn't even like a Republican Democrat thing, but what Bush and Rove did in Texas was they looked at Texas like a business that was failing, like they could respond to, like they could create an administration, kind of like what Trump did in 2024. And I decided, what could we do if we got the governor not just, one person up at the top, but the governor, the lieutenant governor, the secretary of state, the treasurer, the superintendent of public instruction, the attorney general, all on one page, all on one messaging platform. So then that way we could run together. I feel like people would really get behind something like that because we're sick of politics as usual. And that's why I'm here. We need new ideas. We need solutions, not just complaining, not just reporting. We can see that California and Californians are hurting with our own eyes. We want solutions now.
Amen. Well said. And I think that a lot of the people that are angry with how government is being run feel helpless. They feel like they can't do anything about it. And I've been beating this drum for years. I've been doing this angry citizen thing a long time with very little results because people feel discouraged. They feel disconnected. And I keep telling them, first of all, voting is imperative. Stop all those people that say voting doesn't matter. I want to slap them. That makes me so angry. It's exactly what the dark powers want. They want you to shut up, do what you're told, hide in the corner, wait for the cavalry to come running in and fix things. We, the people, need to fix it. And the first thing we need to do is elect people to offices who will serve the will of we, the people, and not the will of dark overlords and corporate interests.
Yeah, and it's something that's interesting, and I think a lot of this goes into character development. A lot of us, our anger brings us to the table. We're frustrated about something, but I think that it's love ultimately that is why we're angry. We love our state, we love our country, we love our countrymen, and we see the way that all of these things are being mistreated, being ran into the ground, and we want a solution. And I feel like what's been happening for too long is no one has been talking about solutions, but that takes a little bit of alchemy. It takes a little bit of patience to be willing to sit there and receive anger and hatred. And, because when people come to the political table, they're not typically there because they're happy to see you. It's like when I worked at Blockbuster Video when I was a kid, everybody that came in to rent a video was happy to see me. It's movie night. They're renting 3 or 4 videos for the weekend. But with politics, it's not that. People are there because they're frustrated. They're not happy about the way that things are going currently. So if, their anger and their frustration brings them to the table, great. But hopefully, a little bit of compassion for one another, a little bit of love for one another could keep them there. But, you talked about a couple of things in your introduction. One of them about being a patriot. I've got patriot tattooed on my back, brother. When people talk to me about being a Republican,
nice.
How Republican are you? I'm a patriot. That's what I am. I love this country. I love my state, and I want what's best for the people in it. You talked about, voter fraud. There would be such an easy way to get through voter fraud and make, these conversations transparent, bring them to the light of day with blockchain. And we treat it, the same way that we do our money, the same way that you do Wall Street, instantaneous response to your vote. So then that way at 8:00 when the polls close, we know exactly, who has voted, who we voted for. You can check that stuff immediately. You don't have to wait for a month to find out what's going on. And really, California, technologically, we should be leading in tech. We shouldn't be really, a lot of people say we want to go back. We want to, I talk about California 2.0, updating California, bringing California, giving California an upgrade across the board. We don't need to shift left or shift right. We sort of need a function restart. And when I talk about upgrading California, a lot of people they get nervous and they start talking about, what about California 1.0? I like that California. And it's like, unless you got a DeLorean and Doc, and we could go back into the past, then it's not going to happen. We're going to need to go forward, and we're going to need to build. You know what I mean?
Sure. And so you're referencing, in essence, the use of technology in order to facilitate a faster and more accurate voter count. Is that
and voter
correct?
Count and government in general. A lot of government should be on an app. In the DMV here in California, you have to pay, $800 to register your vehicle. You have to go into the DMV. It's a big, outrageous scam because they're trying to create jobs and they're trying to funnel money into the state. And that's not government's job. Government's job is not to create jobs. It's not to find ways to employ people. The DMV should be an app. It should be about 80 cents to register your vehicle, and it should be mailed out to you. But
I like
instead, we
that.
have to make a big show of everything. And so, and I read a lot of books, and I read Citizenville by Governor Newsome. And one of the things that he talked about was how he could have given the entire city of San Francisco free Wi-Fi, but that there were legacy companies that were standing in the way of making it possible. So we need to innovate. We need industry. We need to move forward, but we also need to have reverence and respect for one another and human beings and those who are being squashed and forgotten by the system right now.
Good to hear. So I know that California has a pretty impressive list of problems that you guys are facing out there. I know homelessness is a huge problem. You've got a very significant population of illegal aliens, and I'm not apologizing for using the phrase illegal aliens. I don't hate people from other countries. I don't even hate people that come here illegally. I'm just pointing out the obvious fact that they're criminals. The entire concept of a sanctuary city to me is ludicrous. You're saying you're going to harbor criminals. That's literally what you're saying. So come to this city and we will keep you safe from being arrested for committing a crime. It's absolutely ludicrous. And at one point, there were some documentaries online that showed just huge homeless encampments in San Francisco, homeless encampments in Los Angeles. Isn't there one in Los Angeles that's like miles and miles long?
Yeah, so I'd like to speak to both of those issues separately because you brought up homelessness and we talked about immigration. I want to talk about both of those things, but do you want to talk about homelessness first?
Let's do homelessness first because that was the first thought.
So homelessness is of course, you just walk out front. It's no longer just a San Francisco or an LA thing. I go down to my, little shopping center here in French Valley, and you've got homeless people that are sleeping in the parking lot. And it's not just the drug addicted, and it's not just people who are just got out of the detention center. It's people who are getting ready for work that morning.
Yep.
I'd open my real estate shop and there would be 2 or 3 people, putting on either their Del Taco uniform or their Albertsons, uniform, whatever their work uniform is for the day. They slept there that night. And I know homeless people, and I was homeless when I graduated from high school, but we've created this whole industrial complex around homelessness instead of finding solutions, again, instead of finding cures. And so there's a multifaceted approach. The first one is, of course, the massive drug problem that we have. And drug trafficking leads to human trafficking, but we need to squash drug trafficking and we need to offer drug rehabilitation and stop going after the people that are addicted and prosecuting them, but giving them help and a bridge back into society or the long-term care that they need without just a mass incarceration mindset for addiction. But then we need to go after the drug dealers. We need to go after the distributors in a way that we have not done in California in a long time. And it's because we've been so soft on crime and soft on drugs. But we have this new way of being. Of course, we're not worried about marijuana. We're not worried. We don't need to go back to prohibition and make alcohol legal. But things like fentanyl, which are killing people, eliminating people from this planet, methamphetamines, PCP, heroin. These are drugs that we need to worry about. You don't see a casual fentanyl user. You see people that are bent over and, drugged out on the side of the road. That's not the sort of drug addiction that we really saw a whole lot of when we were younger. You knew drug houses, you knew drug dealers, and a lot of them had houses. They were paying rent somewhere. We don't have that anymore. And so drug rehabilitation is a big thing. Mental health rehabilitation. I'm big on the destigmatization of mental health.
Good.
Full disclosure, through my own post-traumatic stress disorder journey, discovering my post-traumatic growth journey, it's often spiritual breakdown and mental breakdown that leads to spiritual and mental breakthrough. And so we need to give people an opportunity to become whole again mentally. And there were a lot of really great institutes for people to do that. One of those being the Sonoma Developmental Center. And if you look this up, it's about 900 acres, one of the most beautiful properties that you could ever see in your life in Sonoma County, on grade A, beautiful real estate. I know the guy who represented the state when he sold this. He said there wasn't a thing wrong with it. And there are centers that currently exist. They exist. We just have to open them back up. But instead, what we're doing is we're selling them off to high density housing developers. And then we no longer have the mental health treatment or drug rehabilitation treatment that we need in areas that are nearby. It's become something that's either only available to the rich in Malibu, or you have to pay a premium for it to try to go through drug rehabilitation, or it's something that is being organized by the church. God help them. God bless them. And then housing is incredibly important, and not building high density housing, but we don't have a lot of starter homes or end of life homes where people are building 1,200 to 1,800 square foot homes. We should see a lot of deregulation with this new housing revolution that's happening, where you could basically go and get housing in a box, container unit housing. There's a lot of really amazing things that people are doing with housing. And in this next housing revolution, I want the people to benefit. I don't want the big companies, the big builders, construction companies, lenders. I want to get people to a place of economic freedom instead of using home ownership as a way to keep people in debt through home loans, interest rates, insurance, and payments that keep people immediately shackled and forever shackled, because those things are never paid off. And then finally, using existing infrastructure. So, using it like warehouses. I see two things all over the Inland Empire, all over California. I see new warehouses and I see homeless people. And a lot of these warehouses are empty. So if we were to use some of these to build these sort of tiny home, sheds inside of them that have a lock, that have a key, with a communal bathroom and a communal space where people can get the health treatment, the help that they need, have access to showers and laundry units. So then that way we are helping people get back on their feet and not just keeping them there so that that we could have black tie dinners and talk about how bad things are while we feel bad about ourselves at $150 a plate meals. And so drug rehabilitation, mental health help, an abundance of housing, and using existing infrastructure. That's how we address the homeless situation.
Good stuff. So as far as illegal immigration, as they call it, I personally, again, I emphasize, because I get called on this. At one point, I pointed out the fact that birthright citizenship does not mean a person can come here pregnant, have a baby, and the baby's a U.S. citizen. That's simply not what that means, and it's not what it says. If you actually read the amendment, it doesn't say that you can come here pregnant, have a baby, and your baby is now a U.S. citizen. And I'm immediately attacked. So one of my idiot Facebook friends said, "I must hate Mexicans." This is what he said to me. Obviously, I hate Mexicans. And I'm so frustrated, because that's not what it means. And I have nothing against immigrants. And the thing that the glaring naked emperor in the room is that we have a process for people to come here legally. And literally, one of the posts that I found, this was hilarious, was it shows a picture of a man that appears to be an immigrant, and it says, "Clever immigrant avoids ICE detention by coming here legally." And it's just that simple. And people say, well, the process is flawed, it's difficult, blah, blah, blah. Maybe legitimate criticisms, but the answer isn't we ignore it. And if you're overrun, and how do we justify having illegal aliens with driver's licenses? Here in Maine, just the other day, a woman was killed by an illegal alien who drove into a park in his car, jumped up over the curb, hit this woman with his car, and he had a license, a Maine driver's license. So clearly this is a problem that needs to be addressed. And I know in California, you guys are really on the front lines of it.
Well, we're in a lot of the front lines of sort of the insanity that's created, again, a lot of industrial complexes around things like immigration, where human beings are essentially being treated like product. They're being funneled through areas and funneled over borders. People are charging them. They're mistreating them. They get brought into California, where there's a whole shadow economy that is propped up on their backs in the hotel industry, in the farming industry, in a lot of manual labor, of course, agriculture. And so the thing is I have compassion for these people, because they're being treated like a product.
Right.
And the people that need to be they don't need special deals. The people that are perpetuating the system, they need to be pushed out of business. So what we need to do, though, is we don't go through and we don't start punishing people retroactively. There's a couple of things that I want to do here. So first off, one of the reasons why a lot of people like that I'm running for office is because I have more of a business approach to these sort of there are common sense solutions to a lot of these complex problems that have been facing us for decades. And so I'm going to go through it. So first off, like you said, legally, I understand that we created a big, massive federal mess that has complicated the immigration system. But that being said, if you're going to run government like a business, you need to figure out who is here. And if you don't know who's here, you can't take care of people, and also the wrong people end up utilizing a lot of your resources. Now, I'm a nationalist, and a lot of people apologize for being a nationalist. I don't. I'm a strong believer in our republic. I think that we should have 50 individual states with 50 individual experiments, and what works for California doesn't work for everyone else. And so in California, what we need to do is, I think that in a lot of places in the country, if you approached it through economics, which is jobs and housing, and you said in order to get a job in California, you have to be a resident of California, or in order to get a job in America, just like how we have E-Verify. You verify someone is legally allowed to be here, and then they can attain employment. If there's someone who's looking the other way, that's on them. In addition, we should expand that program into housing so that people who are not citizens are not able to rent or buy homes in this country, which will allow the people who actually live here to benefit from the housing infrastructure that's already been created. And so there's these H-1B visas that they use. And H-1B is for a lot of tech work and a lot of programming work and things like that. I am 100% against the H-1B visas. I think that there are people that are qualified to do the jobs here. And if they are not, you should train them to do the jobs here. We don't need to have wealth being siphoned out of our communities. Elon Musk, who's probably the most heavily government subsidized man in American history, about $8 million a day, $29 billion in total, really loves the H-1B visas. But that's not surprising. He's not from here. And so the other thing is the student visas. You have a lot of children that come here when they're 4 or 5 years old with parents who came here legally, but technically their children are here on a student visa program. And all of a sudden, they've spent their whole life here. They've been here for 10 years, 12 years. They've got to go back to India, or they've got to go back to Mexico, to a place where they don't speak the language. They don't understand the community. They've been pledging allegiance to our flag for 10, 12 years. They should be looking at colleges. They should be thinking about starting their lives here, not having to go back to a place that they don't understand. And so those two things need to be addressed on a federal level. But as far as here in California, we need to understand that it's not compassion to bring people into a shadow economy where they don't have representation, they don't have rights, they can't go and complain to somebody about their employer, and so they're often mistreated. It also drives up the cost of living because now the cost of wages go down because they're flooding the market with employment, but also the cost of housing goes up because you have 2 to 3 groups of people, 2 to 3 families, 2 to 3 generations that are willing to live in one house, which makes it so that rents go up for everybody. And so, and also the cost on our infrastructure, like you said, the cost of crime is a big one, but the cost on our infrastructure. You go into any emergency room in Southern California, and it is going to be predominantly filled with a lot of people who are illegal immigrants. And so I want our infrastructure to go to work for our people, because any job, any benefit, any bit of healthcare, any bit of education that goes to somebody that is here illegally gets taken away from somebody who's here legally. Now they have to suffer. They have to have a further burden and more competition in a market where there is more, because they're economically subsidizing people who are not here. So the people that are here are then forced to pay more for what should have already been theirs to begin with.
Well said. And I think that this sort of leads us into one of a subject that's always been near and dear to me. I did not serve in the military, but I've known many, many people who have. And I have traveled this nation from end to end. I have talked to many people. I like meeting people. I like finding out about their experiences in life. And Many a veteran has told me their tale of what they saw in time of war, and it was very difficult to listen to. Um, the fact that these men and women are sent into dangerous situations, sometimes very casually, with utter disregard for the severity, the necessity, just, like throwing, fertilizer out on your lawn, just, and then they are back in this country and they are denied the resources that are rightfully theirs, the care, the mental health care, the physical care. The VA is a joke. It's a pathetic, giant money laundering machine that provides often very poor care, and in a lot of cases no care. And it makes my blood boil that we are providing any kind of taxpayer funding to people who come here illegally while veterans sleep on the street. It makes me so angry. So I love how you've addressed this on your website, that the importance of this, and I want to go ahead and give you an opportunity to speak on that.
So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to speak on everything at length. That's why I love these formats so much, is we get an opportunity to show at length, not just what the problem is, but what the solutions are. And one of the solutions for veterans here in the state of California, where we have 1.8 million veterans, more veterans than any other state by a mile, wow, is we have a tremendous amount of power in the executive branch where we could address the VA, the Veterans Administration. There are about 519 gubernatorial appointed positions for heads of committees. About 78 of these require Senate confirmations. But for the VA specifically, we've got about 16, 17 appointments that are, regional heads of the VA in Barstow, in Lancaster, in LA, for the Secretary of Affairs for the VA, for the Undersecretary for the VA in Reading, the VA in Chula Vista, the VA so all of the board, the veteran housing, all these different things can be addressed through the executive branch. And so there are a lot of people that they look at the governor's office and they say, oh, well, geez, you're not going to have a Democratic House, or a Democratic Assembly or a Democratic Senate. And I want to say, yeah, but I've got 519 appointed position committee heads that I can get to work. I can also get rid of a lot of redundant committees that are not there to set up the people for success, but are there to launder money to NGOs. And so there's a lot of help that can happen for veterans. One of those things is having more veterans involved in our care, in our treatment. There's a beautiful program out in my area called the Mighty Oaks Warrior Foundation. It's headed up by an awesome guy who wants to, he's bringing faith-based healing as well. There's the Boulder Crest Institute, which is a non-faith-based program where they focus on, post-traumatic growth through the PATH program. And so there's a lot of different institutes out there, a lot of different opportunities that we can bring people into the VA to help improve the VA, and then also give people more outpatient options so that they can get on a path back to healing. I love my fellow veterans. I'm a combat veteran. I've been a part of, a decent amount of violence when I was over there. And what breaks my heart is that we are so good at sending people off to war, but we are not good at welcoming them home. We've created a whole industrial complex on sending people off to war. We spend $1 trillion a year on war, not to mention that it can't pass any audits, 7 consecutive failed audits, 61% of our money missing. And so we have this military industrial complex that they prop up through Hollywood, they prop up through the media. They want us cheering and flag waving so that we see a movie and then we are inspired to go off and give our lives for our country. I'm watching a movie with my kids about 3 weeks ago. We're watching Transformers. And my wonderful, beautiful son, he's 12 years old. He's getting ready to be 13. He's watching Transformers and he's looking at it and he goes, Dad, I think I want to be a Marine. And wow. I'm like, awesome. And I let it go for a couple of days. But he keeps talking about it. I said, just understand, son, I wasn't fighting Decepticons. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, there's this wonderful book I have right here called War is a Racket. There's another great book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. The problem is we fund 73% of the world's authoritarian dictatorships. We have over 800 foreign military bases. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution prevents us from having foreign military bases and a foreign presence when we're not in a time of war. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time that we declared war was in World War II. And so I am getting tired of the abuse of these powers by our federal government and around the industries that have been created around them, where they are propping up these industries of war because the same companies benefit financially when they send people off to war, as are the ones that rebuild these countries after we've caused devastation. And then our people come home when they're forced to deal with the violence that they experienced with a government that doesn't really care about them.
Well said. Yeah. So when you are elected, like how I said that, when you are elected, you are going to be asked to swear an oath. Now, I already know the answer to my question I'm going to ask you here, but you are willing to swear an oath to uphold and defend the constitutions of the state of California and of the United States, correct?
Yes. Short answer, yes. Second answer, that oath never expired. A lot of people, they take an oath of enlistment. They take an oath for healthcare. They take an oath in the fire department. And we're all swearing an oath to against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We're swearing an allegiance to the Constitution. And so when you have these oaths that have been taken so casually, they're almost sort of a joke to people. When I went in to go in, they're like a photo opportunity. I went in to go take my paperwork out to go run for office. And I took my oath the very first time that I ran. And then I didn't even get ballot access because of some technicality bullcrap with some signatures or whatnot and some bad information that I was given that I won't go into right now. But what happened was I took that oath again, because I took an oath when I served in the Marine Corp. But I took that oath. I was really irritated that they had me take this oath and then they disqualified me from it. And so I, of course, stayed activated. And then the next time when they asked me, said, "You want to take an oath?" I said, "No, not until I'm approved for the ballot." And then when I get approved for the ballot and I pass in my paperwork, then I'm going to take the oath, because their whole thing is, "You want to take an oath? I'll take a picture of you. I'll take a video of you." And it's like, I don't want the attaboy sticker. I don't want the participation trophy. I don't want to post a couple of things on my social media about how I'm going off to, destroy Gavin Newsome and I'm going to put him in handcuffs and throw him in jail along with Michelle and Barack Obama. Like that sort of, Civil War era nonsense is not holding us back. We need to get out of the professional wrestling, politics as entertainment and get back to good governance. But people want to take off their thinking caps and they want to get into tribalism. And people describe these countries, and I'm sorry to go off on tangents, Dana, and I appreciate you going on them. But people go off on these tangents and they say, "Oh, well, what were we doing, trying to bring democracy to Iraq or to Afghanistan?" And correct, we weren't bringing democracy to these areas. But what I want to address, though, is this false sentence that follows that. They say these countries are so tribal. They're so tribal, democracy would never work. And I think, you want to tell me a little bit about America lately? You want to tell me a little bit about, who we are as a country, that, when somebody, they see me talking and they see normally I have a very clean shaven face, and we could talk about that in a moment. But I have a very clean shaven face, and they see my face and they see my hair and they see my suit on and they say, "Oh, you're a Republican. I never would want to listen to a Republican. Trump is failing our country." Or they look at me and I'm clean shaven and I've got my hair, whatever they say. "This guy looks slick. He looks like Gavin Newsome. He's probably just another Democrat." I'm like, before I even open my mouth, before we even talk one bit of policy, people are making snap judgments and trying to Trump or Newsome me when it's a profound amount of ignorance. Let's talk policy. I want to talk policy. That's really
Well
what I
said.
want to do, because if we can talk policy, we can talk about the solutions that we need to solve all these problems and not just be reporting on them.
Yeah, well said. And as a nation, we are woefully ignorant, ignorant of our history, ignorant of the Constitution, ignorant of our rights. It makes me angry, but it's by design. There was years ago a law was passed that requires our schools, our government-run schools. They're not public schools, America. They're government-run schools, and they were required to teach the Constitution. And even when I talk to my son, my youngest son, about the Constitution, his mother gets very flustered, like I'm doing something wrong. What are you talking about? This is like, to me, this is like you get the most magnificent privilege of being part of the best club in the world. And we have all these wonderful benefits. So we have this wonderful club, and there's a pool and a tennis court and a pool room and a game room and a bar and a restaurant, and people come in and they go, well, that pool's dangerous. Someone might drown. We shouldn't have the pool. We should or fence it off or get a guard for the gate, or we are blessed to live in America and to live in a constitutional republic where we have all these rights that are specified in the Constitution, and we don't even know them, and half of us are willing to simply vote them away because they're dangerous, and we don't want to. And so we want Big Brother to take care of us. We have this nanny state mentality. It drives me crazy. We need a license for everything. You need a license to hunt, to fish, to ride your motorcycle, to drive a car, to provide health care to people, and it's woefully out of hand, and we the people need to fix it, and the only way we'll do that is to be informed, get informed. And this gets back to what you were saying about people judging you. They love to judge a book by its cover. And I am frequently in conversations with people where they'll say to me, because a lot of my views could be certainly construed as being Republican in nature, and they'll say, well, you must be a Republican. I say, no, I'm not a Republican. I disdain political parties. They're the reason why we're in so much trouble. It's like you said, the professional wrestling, the demonstrating of this fight that isn't really a fight. They're all on the same page.
It's all one big club and you ain't in it, right?
Amen.
George Carlin said one big club and you ain't in it. And so, the thing is this Republican Democrat narrative, what they do is they like to saddle both sides with this sort of virtue signaling of how Democrat are you? What is the purity test? How Republican are you? Are you Republican enough to say this? And are you Democrat enough to say this? And what they're doing is they're so busy smoke checking themselves and smoke checking each other that there's no big tent. And, I seem to remember seeing in a lot of different places, e pluribus unum, from many one. And we're so busy fractionalizing ourselves because someone won't pass our version of what the purity test is. When, I'm like, geez, well, if we keep purity testing one another, it's going to be an awful small club of people. And that's where a lot of people are becoming disenchanted with politics in general, disenchanted with Republicans, disenchanted with Democrats. And they say, oh, well, geez, if I'm not willing to let biological boys compete against girls in high school, then, because they're, they identify as trans, that means that I'm not a Democrat. Okay, well, then I'm not a Democrat. Or I'm not willing to ban gay marriage, then that means I'm not a Republican. Okay, well, then I'm not a Republican. And so what's happened is in California, you've got 48% of people who are registered Democrats and 24% who are registered Republicans, outnumbered 2-1.
Wow.
And they still want to do this stupid purity test. And it's like, man, you got a heartbeat. You care about this country. You care about the state. You care about your fellow countrymen. You're willing to have a conversation. And really, I bring it back to 3 values, because I think that we need to have sort of a new founders movement, of a movement, because our political founders the founders of this country, they didn't have political parties. And yet all of a sudden we are driven to have political parties, and we're not willing to caucus with one another. We're not willing to eat with one another. We don't have meetings with each other. But e pluribus unum from any one, right? That's number one.
Well said.
From many places, you are here. I'm glad you're here. The second one is disputatio. Are you willing to debate your ideals? If you're not willing to debate your ideals, get lost. If you're not willing to, question yourself and hear people that you disagree with, get lost. I don't want to have you around. And the third one is libertas, liberty. Do you believe in freedom? And if you can believe in those three things, then I'm about you and I'm about that life. But freedom is economic freedom, and with freedom comes a little bit of responsibility. Amen. You can't be a free people without being a responsible people. And so we need to have a government that has our best interest at heart. Because right now what we have is we have a government, we have government overlords, and then we have corporate overlords. But we don't own anything. We don't own our homes. We don't own our businesses. We don't own the land that they sit on, and we're all being priced out of the grocery store. We're being priced out of fast food. We're being priced out of working because it costs so much for childcare. We're being priced out of having kids or having a decent education. We're being priced out of going to the doctor's office. We're being priced out of filling up our gas pump. And so this sort of over concentration on the capitalization of scarcity has created a point where you've got this monopoly board where no one can afford to go around the board anymore.
Yep. And that is sort of gets back to the homelessness situation. You have people, like you said, these people are not, drug users. Some are, but a lot of them are not. They're just people that are having trouble paying their bills because they just can't make enough money to pay rent. And, we have a lot of the same things going on here in Maine. We have a lot of homeless people here in Maine. And in Maine, it gets really cold in the wintertime. Let me tell you, there are sometimes in the depths of the winter, it gets to be Arctic cold. It is not a good place to be homeless. We don't have the economic opportunities. We are heavily taxed, heavily regulated. Our governor is entirely corrupt. I have lobbied to have her thrown in jail, and I am not messing around. I'm dead serious about that. She is a traitor. She perjured her oath. So, we can certainly feel where you're coming from on that. And regarding, what you're talking about, which is what I call an ad hominem style response, which is frequently what people do. As soon as I say, well, this person says, or this person wants to do this or whatever, immediately I get, oh, well, that person is bad because blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't care if they're bad. And this always happens when it manifests most strongly in the Donald Trump discussions. If at any point I criticize Donald Trump, the Trump supporters come out of the woodwork to tell me, they start saying stupid things to me like orange man bad, implying that I have no just cause to criticize him. I hate him for no apparent reason. And vice versa. If I say anything in support of Donald Trump, he did something I approve of. He reinforced our border. And overnight, we suddenly see a radical drop in the number of illegal aliens that are coming across the border. What American would oppose that? And I get to hear again what a horrible man he is, and how he's a fraud and a shyster and a liar and a con man. And folks, we cannot keep doing that because we're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, the purity test has become so stupid. Yes. You're a Republican. There's an R next to your name. Oh, all of you deserve to go to prison because you support a convict. Or you're a Democrat. Oh, you're with Newsome. What an idiot. And so I had this this person that asked me what's your plan on winning over the libtards? And I'm like, well, first off, we're going to stop calling them libtards. That's a good place to start.
Well said. Thank you.
But second, we should concentrate on populism. Concentrate on populism. There's a reason why Trump was popular, and it's because he was talking about things that were important to the people that live here in this country. Now, is he going to execute on all those things? Who knows? There's a reason why Bernie Sanders is popular. He's identifying a problem that we have with an oligarchy, with a small group of people that control an overwhelming amount of influence and control in this country. And so, we have these movements, like we have Occupy Wall Street, and we have the Tea Party Patriots, and we have MAGA, and we have No Kings, we have the Bernie Bros. All of these different people, they're right for the most part with their complaints. Where they differ in some of these different things are the solutions. But what if we started focusing on the solutions to our problems, creating a better state, And then instead of Texas and California, competing to see who could gerrymander their state to where the other party doesn't exist anymore, and they have authoritarian rule over their state by Republicans or Democrats, maybe we should concentrate on having a competition where we're creating a better standard of life, where we have a lower cost of living, where young people are buying homes and have an income that they can support having a family. Because right now the litmus test of what success looks like in America looks like a very low functioning, low brow, very stupid, knuckle dragging, Cro-Magnon way of thinking, where we're making fun of people with memes, and we're owning people online. And it's like, gosh, it infuriates me. And I'm like, gosh, you want to be beaten intellectually, or you want to be beaten physically? Because we could either get up on stage or we could go behind the building. That's where I go. That's where like the angry part of me goes.
I hear you.
Then the other part of me is like, man, these people just need to be heard just like everybody else. They need to be understood just like everybody else. But it takes so much time and energy to be willing to receive the sort of hatred that you need to receive, and then not throw it back out. And I'm not perfect. I fail all the time, but not throw it back out. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. When the election happened and this country was so sharply divided, there were two very distinct sides. Donald Trump is a god, does everything right, 10D chess. And the other side is Donald Trump is a horrible, evil, vile villain. And I tried to have discussions with some people very close to me regarding just a calm, rational discussion. So, okay, you hate Donald Trump. Can you explain to me, please, why do you hate him? Why are you so, really off the hook, like unhinged, upset about this? Like I have to leave the country. And one person close to me, I said, well, why do you feel this way? And someone very close to me said, there was some woman somewhere in some state who died because she was denied an abortion. My personal view on this, baby murder. Sorry if you don't agree with me. Okay, but that's what's happening. You have a living baby, you go in, the baby gets chopped up or hauled out piece by piece. That's not health care or abortion care. It's murder. But we can disagree on that. At the end of the day, this woman supposedly dies because she needed this abortion because she was going to die if she didn't get it. She was denied this abortion. I don't know that this actually happened. I tried to track it down. I found no evidence that it actually happened. But in any case, I said to her, how is this Donald Trump's fault? Do you see? It just doesn't make sense. Donald Trump didn't drive down there and stop this woman. And are you really trying to tell me that the doctors had no solution for this woman? They said, sorry, that's it. We're just going to sit and watch you die. And at the end of the day, is that the first thing that pops into your head? You're so angry. You're so outraged that you're willing to leave talking about leaving the country. You won't actually do it. You're all talk. But whatever, you're so mad that you're literally talking, I hate America. I want to leave. And you can't tell me anything that backs up what you're saying. We need to stop being hysterical, America. Calm down. Look at the issue. Find out the facts before you render a judgment or an opinion. Find out the facts and base your opinions on facts, not on hearsay. And most of all, turn off your mainstream media. It is the ministry of propaganda filled with lies, fear-mongering, deceit, and absolutely, completely controlled by the same group. Look up Operation Mockingbird, okay? The same group of oligarchs controls the mainstream media, controls the narrative, and you can see through it if you apply discernment.
So, and I'll tell you, I think that with President Trump, I think that most people who are rational, and this is a good litmus test. And I think that when you talk to somebody, you say, hey, what are 5 good things that President Trump has done good? Could you name, or bring it down to 3? What are 3 good things that President Trump has done good? What are 3 things that he's done wrong, in your opinion? And if you can't do that with just about anyone in your life, you are a sheep, you are a blind follower, you are in a cult. With Newsome, same thing. What are 3 good things that he's done? I've been criticizing him regularly about the CEQA constraints, the California Environment Quality Act, and the amount of constraints that hold back and inhibit housing between the state level on CEQA and between the EPA on the national level. And he rolled back a lot of CEQA regulations. And so the thing is, there are things that he does good and there are things that he does bad. Overwhelmingly, do I disagree with him on his approach with a lot of different things? Yes. But it's that sort of, the stupidity of like, I'm going to vote Democrat no matter what, blue no matter who, no matter what, I'm going to vote for Democrat because it doesn't matter who the Republican is. Same thing with the other side. There's nothing that a Republican can do because no matter what, even if that Republican is the worst person on planet Earth, it's better than the alternative. And it's like, when did we stop looking at human beings and be like, what do you stand for? What do you stand for? Who are you? Can you tell me what you want to accomplish? What is important to you? Is there a D next to his name or an R next to his name? And if it's an R, he's a Nazi. If it's a D, he's a socialist.
Communist,
Correct. And I'm sort of tired. I'm not tired. I'm totally tired. I'm exhausted of the narrative. And so it's like, okay, so it's a way that we've used to divide and conquer people. I was speaking to high schools in the last election cycle as part of their political and economics classes. They would bring their political and economics classes together, and I would go and I would speak. And I did this in, I think, 4 different school districts, maybe 5 different school districts. And I would ask them, I would say, okay, let's say you conquered a country. You are supreme lord, supreme dictator. You are the authoritarian leader. What are you going to take over? How are you going to maintain control? And it was so interesting listening to these kids. How would you take control? And I'd write it all up on the board. Oh, you know what? I'd take control of the education system. Okay, that was smart. I'd take control of the military. I could take control of the media so that, I can control what people think. I'd take control of the food, the agriculture. I'd take control of the water. I'd take control of the oil and the natural resources. I would spiritually, mentally, and morally bankrupt the people so that they, I would put them in economic chains so that they don't have the ability to feed themselves. And you think of all these different things. And then the question that I would ask everybody, once we had about 20, 30 things up there on the list, is I would say, now what country does that sound like? And sometimes they say, oh, China. But 9 out of 10 times, I think probably about 75% of the time, they say, that's America. Yep. I say, okay. So if you know that freedom is economic freedom, and you know that there's a constitution and there's a Bill of Rights that prevent a lot of these things from happening, and you have the framework for success to respond to these things, what are you going to do about it? And I did the class right there. Just put them in a place where they understand that systemic injustice started very early, and it started with conditioning.
Well said. So this time has really flown by, and there's a whole bunch of stuff I have written down that I wanted to talk about. But I think we're not gonna have quite enough time for that. But
you know what, Dana, I gave you a hard out, but my wife is actually home now, so the kids are gonna live. If you need to log off, I totally understand it.
No. I just don't want to. I don't want to put too much at once together, and I just wanted to kind of highlight that there's a lot more that we could discuss here. But
I will go when you want to go. I did a Spaces the other night, and I don't want to go this long tonight, but I knew that the Spaces was going to be a long one. The people on X get a little bit wild. I've listened to a couple of them.
Yeah.
It'll be the middle of the night, and I'll look at Spaces, and I'll see, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, these guys are still going. Mm-hmm. And so when Legend asked me to be a part of the Spaces with the California project, I was like, okay, brother, I'll do it. I'll make sure I got some water, and I've got, some an energy drink with me and whatnot. Yeah, I've got a charger, and so we jumped into that Spaces, and I'm telling you, I would have loved to have jumped into my platform. I would have loved to have jumped into the contract with California, but people have been duped for so long in California with these people. They'll call them rhinos, they'll call them traders. But the thing is, it's both sides of the aisle. People that say one thing, they get in there, they do another. They don't represent the people. They're financially manipulating people. They're financially benefiting off of the campaign. And so it was just 5.5 hours of just sort of being smoked out, trying to figure out if I was a traitor. But it was rough. So that being said, I prefer that we don't go for 5.5 hours, but I can give shorter answers to your questions. What I try to do is somebody that I have a great deal of respect for. I don't agree with them 100% of the time. I don't. I really don't. But I grew up listening to a lot of talk radio. What a dork. But I grew up listening to talk radio. And I listened to Dennis Prager when I was young and while I was in the military. And he had this thing called the Happiness Hour on Friday. But there's this great thing that he would say every time. He'd say, I prefer clarity over agreement. If we disagree, we disagree. But I want to know where you stand, and I want you to stand I want you to know where I stand. So you want to do a little bit of a lightning round? I'll try to give you some answers a little bit quicker.
Well, I'm gonna just bring up the next point. That's the top one on my list, and we'll see where it goes and
okay,
where the current takes us. So we've seen a just absurd amount of fires in California. They are called wildfires. I do not like the name wildfires. I do not like the fact that there seems to be a very profound lack of concern regarding how these fires start. It seems to now be very, very downplayed in the media. They just talk about it as if it's like a tornado. It just pops up, tears around, wiping things out, vanishes, and we just all blithely accept that this is just a thing that happens. Well, we all know that wildfires do start. So, for example, we all know that lightning will start fires. Okay. But at some point, we're looking at, 8 or 10 fires. And they talk about, the conditions are dry. It's very hot. The winds are high. Okay, well, that would certainly be conducive to spreading fires. But I've never seen it get hot enough in California that a fire suddenly erupts in a pile of brush. So number one would be, what are your thoughts on that whole situation? And number two, when you get to be the governor, what sorts of things do you have in mind for addressing that problem?
Okay, so beautiful question. One of the first things that we need to understand is these things did not happen on accident. It is by design, and you could look at the way that things are set up on a paperwork level to understand that the lack of rights that people have to their own property after someone has been economically and financially devastated by the worst experience of their lives. They're then not willing to have a foothold or give them a foothold to recuperate, because it's by design. And so, of course, we could talk about water infrastructure. We could talk about firefighting infrastructure. We could talk about fire breaks in industry, bringing the logging industry back. We could talk about cleaning up our forest and the, Forest Service. We could talk about controlled burns. We can also talk about energy companies that are leading, the leading cause of a lot of these fires is because of outdated, worn through equipment, which is why, PG&E has 85 manslaughter charges, and why we, the people in California, paid for their defense. We paid for their representation. We paid for them to get bailed out. We pay for them monthly, and then they still pay their CEOs bonuses, and then the fire victims get compensated in PG&E stock. I mean, how disrespectful. Wow. And so PG&E should have been allowed to go bankrupt. They should have been allowed to go under, because they're the sort of idea of the good-hearted private companies are going to do right by the public is crazy pants when you're looking at energy. Water and energy are two things that government should be involved in. And we have abundant water in energy, but industry has been capitalizing on making those resources scarce. We privatized uranium. How stupid is that? We're like one of the only countries on earth with a private nuclear program, which is why we don't even enrich uranium here anymore. 70% of our uranium is enriched in China and Russia. But what we need to do is we need to focus on energy, and we need to focus on water. Building these giant, white water silos everywhere that are full of water, so that in the event that there's the power's out, water still comes out of the taps. But those were built and those were empty. Isn't that a problem? And so there's a lot that needs to happen, but the insurance commissioner probably has the biggest job of anybody. That's why I don't know if anyone has taken out paperwork to run for insurance commissioner in the state of California. Immediately, you're essentially going to be the most hated person in the state of California, because Ricardo Lara failed Californians. He made insurance so predatory in our state that a lot of insurance companies got up and left, and they instituted the California Fair Plan, which is basically insolvent now. There's about 15,000 homes that were burned down, for 15,000 homes, businesses churches that were burned down during this last fire. And I've been trying to find a great insurance commissioner, but it's hard. And I found this gal, her name is Jennifer Fitzgerald. She lost her home. She was helping people navigate the FAIR Plan on X. And I asked her to run, and she didn't want to run. I've asked a lot of people to run. I've asked people to run for attorney general, for insurance commissioner, for superintendent of public instruction, for lieutenant governor, for attorney general, for secretary of state, for state controller. I'm trying. It's not easy to get people who are successful in the private sector and ask them, hey, do you want to come serve and make 1/10 of what you're going to make out there in the private sector by working for government and to be hated? But it's been work, brother.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I mean, I can only hope that enough people will see you and hear your voice, and that's why I brought you on, because I just wanted to echo your voice, because I like everything you said, and I think you're the right man for the job, truly. And if you can find the right crew to help you out, I could see California becoming a much, much better state, and I would love to see that, because again, California is near and dear to my heart, and I'm offended at the atrocities that are being committed by the government in California. There's just so much waste and fraud and corruption and unnecessary red tape and constant government involvement in everybody's lives, and that just needs to stop. And same here in Maine. I mean, we have the same the same kinds of problems.
I was going to say, what's interesting about Maine and with California is we're blue states. We're predominantly blue states, but we're also major donor states. We're states that we pay more in taxes than we get back in services by a mile. And so when I look at the amount of disentanglement that needs to happen with an over bloated federal government, people talk, capital gains tax and, property tax. There's so many different things that are, federal taxes where, you've got your income tax, you've got your, in California, there's no estate tax, there's no death tax, there's no capital gains tax. These are federal taxes. And when I look at the fact that we're giving the state of California, the country of America, $806 billion every year, and there's $37 trillion in debt, it drives me nuts. But I just wanted to say that, we've upgraded the campaign. I've got probably 5, 6, 7 people that reached out to me to ask me to be on their podcast over the summer. But, we've got 5 kids. 2 of them, it was their last summer. Our youngest just entered kindergarten. So I apologize to everybody for kind of taking the summer to focus on my family. I was doing a ton of events. I was going around speaking at a lot of Republican women groups and, giving different speeches, doing different interviews. And I posted a lot of that content as of last Thursday. But I appreciate everyone's patience and everyone's support while we've been doing this. It's going to take a lot of work. And I think that for those of us that want to see something better in these blue states, there's a lot of things that are beautiful about Maine. There's a lot of things that are beautiful about California. Absolutely. But what's beautiful about a republic and what this country was supposed to be is that America gets to be America. And we have a national identity. But within that national identity, you've got 50 individual experiments that they're able to do what they believe is right for them. And then that way, if you're in a situation where you don't like the way that things are happening in Texas, you could jump over to California. If you don't like the way that things are happening in California, you could jump over to Idaho. But what's happening too often is that our federal government is becoming too powerful. And so if you were to fly over this country from Sacramento to Washington, D.C., and you were to jump out of an airplane and, parachute down anywhere in the country, it would look relatively the same. You'd find a Starbucks, you'd find a Chipotle, you'd find, all these different franchises and whatnot. And it's because of all the government subsidization. You'd find a Walmart, and what we need to do is we need to stop with the government picking winners and losers, understand that freedom requires a little bit of responsibility, and then allow the different states to either succeed or fail on their own, but get the government out of our business.
Amen. That's a fantastic note to end on, because I could not agree with you more. I've been banging this drum for so long, and I'm so tired of people condoning government intrusion in our lives, and it doesn't help. That's the thing. It's not like it's working. It's not like they're accomplishing the things they claim they're going to accomplish. A license is no assurance that the person who has the license is competent to do the thing that they got the license to do. Driver's license is no assurance of competence. Here in Maine, just the other day, a guy was driving a Porsche in a rural area of Maine, and they haven't said this yet on the news, but we all know what was going on. The guy was driving like a bat out of hell and skidded across into the oncoming lane, hit a semi head on, bounced off across a yard into a garage, died. I'm sure he had a driver's license, you see? And yet the guy's driving 80 miles an hour in a 35 mile an hour zone. You go see a doctor. The doctor supposedly has a license to practice medicine. So we're supposed to be assured that the doctor is competent to practice medicine. Then the doctor leaves a surgical sponge in you when he closes you up. You know, every license.
Correct. No, 100%.
The assurance that they claim the government isn't doing their job.
And you should push it back to the state level for all of these different things, because you know, when people talk about, oh, you want to get rid of the FDA, it's like, yeah, I do want to get rid of the FDA. If you want to help the healthcare industry, one of the best things that you could do is get rid of the FDA, have one state at least where people have medical freedom and they could, you know, make the decisions that they want to fight for their lives in a method of their choosing. And then you create a social safety net so that people aren't dying the way that they die right now currently, which is 652,000 people die of medical bankruptcy. Excuse me, let me correct that. 66.5% of all bankruptcies declared in America are due to medical debt. Wow. 652,000 bankruptcies every year are due to medical debt. The number one fundraiser on GoFundMe is due to medical debt. And that is because of big pharma. That is because of this big medical industry where, you know, you don't have health care anymore. You have sick care because it doesn't pay to treat, to cure diseases. It pays to treat them. And so they're keeping us sick. You know, they're keeping us poor. They're keeping us, you know, where we don't have water. Our farms are dry. Our kids aren't getting the sort of education that they need. And we're so desperate and we're so held down that we start thinking that our neighbor is our enemy. And that's where we're at right now. But I know that you're trying to wrap this this podcast.
I don't want to derail you, brother. You're on a roll, and I agree with everything you're saying. So, and it needs to be said. And so, obviously, I will do whatever I can to help you get elected, and I would love to see that. And I hope that a lot of people hear this message, folks. If you're seeing this and you like what this guy is saying, get the message out. Tell people to check this guy out. Okay, listen to what he has to say. Make up your mind that you would like to see him as, especially if you're in California, obviously. And remember this, America, roughly 50% of you do not vote. Okay, and that really pisses me off. I'll tell you why. A lot of people have fought and bled and died to give you your place in this constitutional republic. And it requires you to be involved. It is not a spectator sport. We all have to get involved. You need to make your wishes heard to our elected servants. You have a right to do that. And furthermore, you have a duty and an obligation to do it, because everyone that gets sent into combat because the powers that be make that decision, and they make that decision with your blessing. If you don't tell them hell no, and I did, believe me, when we went to invade Iraq, I raised bloody hell.
Good man.
Because I said we have absolutely no business sending our soldiers to Iraq. That's insane.
Good man. I'll tell
Why
you
the
what,
hell would we do this?
I was younger at the time, and I was buying into a lot of these false narratives, you know. But I remember, you know, Michael Moore was going around during the Fahrenheit 9/11 film, and he was asking these representatives, "Did you serve in the military? Do your kids serve in the military?" And you know, of course, no, they didn't. And if they did, you know, and a lot of them were very tucked away. And so I'm tired of the narrative that I was buying when I was younger, which was the neocon, let them win, the axis of evil, you know, the enemy is Libya, the enemy is Iran, the enemy is, you know, Palestine, the enemy is, you know, I don't need to have a bunch of enemies. The best thing for the world is for America to be strong and independent. The best thing for America is for California to be strong and independent, because that sort of decentralization of power, decentralization of economics is good for the world, and sovereignty is good for our country. And when we go around denying the rest of the world sovereignty, and they end up on the receiving end of our bad politics, we can't be surprised when they want to get out of the receiving end of our politics and come into our country, because we're a destabilizing force. And so the more that we could get disinvolved, the less money that can that leave this country. It starts on the state level, by us on the state level looking at our country, looking at our government, saying $37 trillion in debt, and you increase the spending, $37 trillion in debt, and we're building what? $37 trillion in how many foreign military bases do we have? So I look at the amount of debt that we're having, and that we spend $1 trillion a year on defense, and that we spend $1 trillion a year servicing the debt. And I'm looking at a lot of this, and I know that it is not economically sustainable. And so if it's not economically sustainable, then we're heading towards one of three revolutions. The first one is the American Revolution, where things are violent on the streets, a violent ejection of the oligarchy. It is a French Revolution, where there's violence upheld by the court, where we are dragging people out and bringing them to judgment in front of a jury of their peers, and then voting them to death, which is not what I want to see. Or the third one is we have an intellectual revolution. We get out ahead of it. We realize that there are gifts and the shifts that, along with every death cycle, there is an opportunity to be born again better than you were before. Because in business, if you are failing, you have to honor the death cycle, or you're going into bankruptcy.
Yes.
If you're green, you're growing. It's life.
Yeah.
And the problem is, and I'm sorry that I go off on these tangents, but the problem is that we don't have leaders or people in leadership that are full people. They're half of a person. They're an image of a person. And so there's this great book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And it talks about having access to your king energy, your magician energy, your lover energy, and your warrior energy. And there's too many, specifically men, that don't have access to their warrior. And so they fall victim to this weak, narcissistic shadow entity of being a tyrant. They don't have access to their magician. And if you don't have access to your magician, you can't be creative, because you've never done what Carl Jung wanted you to do, which is understand your shadow. Because in destruction is often somebody who is very creative, but they haven't been given the outlet, or haven't found an outlet for their creativity. And so this, magician energy, this lover energy, if you can't laugh or cry or smile, there's a problem. And there's this beautiful book called the Gates of Hell, the Gates of Fire, written about the Thermopylae Pass and the 300 Spartans. Okay. And what they did is they took these sticks as a way to identify these the Spartans when they went off to battle, and they would break the stick in half, and they would put one half in a bag, and they would keep the other half with them. One half symbolized their family and art and music and culture and democracy and all of these different things, these theories and whatnot, beauty, your pets and your family. And the other half is your warrior, that destructive energy. And you left your family and your creativity and your love and everything behind you in order to be this warrior that you needed to be in the battlefield. And that, when the battle ended, they would come back and they would mark both sides of the stick, and they would call the stick. The person would come and they would reclaim the other part of them. They would put the stick together, and then that's how they knew that who they had lost. But it also gave them an opportunity to remember, I am coming back now. I need to reclaim that other part of me that attaches me to humanity, that attaches me to my wife and my family and the best of what the world has to offer, and not just the darkness.
Wow. That's intense, man. I have to say, I've learned a lot in this discussion, David. So I appreciate that. I make some very fancy visual aids for my presentation. So this is my fancy, let's see if we can see that or not, but there it is. So this is my representation of the dilemma or situation of our elected servants. So first we need to remember that these people work for us. If David Serpa gets elected to be the governor of California, when he is our employee, not mine because I don't live in California, but he works for us. We have to remember that. We are going to be on this side of we the people, and we're telling him what to do. He needs to hear our voices, your voices, California. You need to tell him this is what we want. This is our wish, our desire, because he's also going to be getting a lot of pressure from corporations. This is where our process goes wrong. So corporations give money to these people that are running for office, and they don't do it for free. They expect something. They want something in return. They want their interests to be put ahead of our interests.
That's right.
So first, we need to reverse this paradigm. It's no longer going to be the corporate interest rule, the lobbyist rule. It's going to be we the people rule, because I guarantee you we want the same things. And I'm told I'm wrong on this, just like every other thing that comes out of my mouth. Immediately some idiot comes along and goes, no, we don't all want the same things. And he starts talking about the things that we disagree on. Well, let's talk about the things on which we agree.
Yes.
No one I know wants to be homeless. No one I know wants to pay high taxes. No one I know wants to have the government constantly intruding in their life, telling them what they are and are not allowed to do, and when they're allowed to do it, and under what circumstances they're allowed to do it. No one wants to be hungry. No one wants to see their neighbors be hungry. No one wants to see someone being homeless. Okay, we don't lack compassion as a nation. We're very compassionate. That's why the overlords are able to subjugate us, because they pick a cause that's a noble, righteous cause, and they infect it, and they take it over, and they start sucking money out of it. And we have to stop that from happening. And it takes all of us together.
Correct. And well, honestly, and it's a way to sort of emotionally and spiritually bankrupt us, because that's part of what activated me was, I told the kid, hey, we're going to go see all these state parks, and we kind of mapped it out. And I think we saw probably 6, 7, 8 state parks in a couple of weeks in an RV. But while we were doing that, we're going, and all over the state of California, there's homeless people. And they say, hey, Dad, can we give them food, or can we give them money? And there's a certain amount of shame that we all are forced to feel when we go to look the other way.
Yes.
But there's also a certain amount of shame that comes when we realize that we can't save everybody. Yes. And so there are problems. And what we do as a society is we say, oh my gosh, there are 1,000 bodies in the river. Isn't that terrible? And then you've got these candidates that sort of, they get up in front of people, and instead of offering an alternative or saying, hey, listen, this is why there's bodies in the river, or start getting them out, they just say, oh, look at all the bodies in the river. Isn't that terrible? Look at all those bodies in the river. Isn't it? We can all agree these bodies are, it's like, okay, well, let's go upstream. Let's figure out why that's happening.
Yes.
Let's see what we can do about catching them before they go in. And then let's also, because we could walk and chew gum at the same time, let's see how many people we could save.
That's
you know what I mean?
I'm saying. Exactly. Just do what you can. Every little bit counts. Every voice counts. So I call the governor. I say, this is how I feel about this issue. And yeah, Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, doesn't care what I have to say. She is not going to immediately say, oh, this Dana guy called me and wants me to lower taxes. So I'm going to go right back to the legislature, take that budget I just submitted, cut all the fraud, waste, and corruption out of it. But if 1,000 people call, and folks know this, I'm pretty close with a few of our legislators here in Maine, and I had a conversation with one of them, was talking about the number of contacts that they receive, and at one point had used the phrase a lot to describe the number of calls that they received on one particular issue. And I'm thinking, what would you think would be a lot? There's 1.5 million people in Maine. What would a lot of calls be to you? To me, I'm thinking 1,000, 1,500, right? 10. 10 people called this one legislator and said, this is how I feel about this issue. And this person said to me, this was a lot of calls. If you make the call, and they're accessible. You can write letters, you can email them, you can call them. They work for us. We have a right to. And a lot of the people that are in positions of power, these elected servants, want to do the right thing. But they are faced with a giant, bloated, corrupt organization that pushes back against them. But that organization cannot stand the light. That's why they don't want information being shared. Because if everyone sees them,
I want to believe that they want to do the right thing. I want to
some
believe
do.
it, Dana.
Some do.
And the difficulty is when I'm talking with Republicans and the MAGA people, and look, I'm MAGA. I want to make America great again. I supported President Trump in his run, and there's a lot of people that find that out. Like, oh, you're disgusting, deplorable, blah 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 blah. Yeah. But the problem is with both sides of the aisle is nobody wants to drain their half. Nobody wants to drain that. Can you drain half of a toilet? You can't drain half of a toilet. You can't drain half of a swamp. It doesn't work out that way. All the mess is still there. And so can you, MAGA, can we justify going after Pelosi while not going after Lindsey Graham or Mitch McConnell? Can we do that? Well, I don't think we can do that. And so people look at us and they say, well, you don't have any integrity. And then the thing is David Hogue was going to contest the Democratic Party. And a lot of people say, oh, David Hogue, he's a ambulance chaser and that. I get it. There's a lot of stupid things that a lot of stupid people do, there's a lot of stupid things that a lot of smart people do. But what David Hogue did, and I'm always willing to talk about where someone is right. What David Hogue did that was right was he said, we have to primary our own. We have to check our own. And they got rid of him so quick. They ousted him. And so when I'm talking to people and I'm saying that we have to get rid of these different people, what sort of integrity would I have if I didn't say that we need to get rid of everybody? So when I look at it, I look at the state of California like it's a business. I look at America like it's a business. What did Trump do when he went in? He went in and he brought in as many people as he could. He fired a bunch of people. That's what we need to do in California. We need to realize that we have to fire a bunch of people, but we also have to bring in new blood, both on the Republican side and the Democratic side of things. Let's primary everyone. Let it be a red wedding. Let it be a blue wedding. I don't care what the wedding is, but primary everyone. The good representatives, and I can think of a few, but I could probably count them on one hand. They're going to be around at the end of it. But people deserve to have an alternative pick. And as the party, we're not doing any favors by gatekeeping and by not allowing people to run for office and to squash dissent within our own party, because the Republican establishment does it through the party and through the media, and the Democratic Party does it through their party and through the media. Look at how difficult of a time they've had at trying to run a successful primary in the Democratic Party. They squash people in the media. They pretend like people don't exist, but they also have those super delegates, and they completely robbed Bernie Sanders of the nomination. And so people start looking at the Republican Party and they say, well, that's not a party that has dissenting voices. That's a party that squashes dissenting voices. And so I don't expect that the Democratic Party is going to uplift Katie Porter, because she was the head of the Progressive Caucus and she's the head Democrat right now. They're going to introduce someone else because they can't let that happen. Just like they couldn't let Bernie be president of the United States of America, and they couldn't even let it be handled by the people. They're not going to let Katie Porter be the nominee because she's a little bit too principled for the Democratic Party in their system. The Democrats hate the progressives just like the Republicans hate MAGA.
Very true. But at the end of the day, we the people are still in charge. Okay? Until they change the Constitution, which they're trying to do, folks. Believe me, they don't want us to have freedom. But until that day, we still have all the power. If you figure 50% of all of you out there don't vote, okay, every one of you who doesn't vote, get off your fat, lazy American ass. Vote for this guy. Give him a shot. How much worse could it be, right? I mean, look at California, the state of things in California. Hear what he's saying. What does he say that doesn't make sense? Unless you think he's a complete fraud. And this is, I told you this on the phone when we talked. There's two choices in my book. Okay, God gives us discernment. My discernment tells me you are either complete fraud, an actor of unparalleled capacity, or you mean what you say, and I'm pretty certain you mean what you say. I respect that a lot, and I would love to see you get elected. So, folks,
I appreciate that, brother.
Share this message. Share this with everyone you know. Tell them, listen to what this guy has to say. Make up your mind. Vote him into office. let's get some positive changes in a few states in this nation, and California can lead the way. So God bless you. I wish you all the best, David.
God bless you, Dana.
Any,
Thank you so much.
parting words you want to give to the people of America? Here's your chance. You can speak your mind and say whatever you want. No censorship here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll take a quick moment to say a couple of parting words. What I want people to realize is that we need to see past the tribalism in America, and we need to do a little bit more of what Steve Bannon has done, where he goes out and he intellectually engages the other side. He talks about populism. He talks about nationalism. And so if we could get on an economic, nationalist, populist message that the people can get behind, it's not even a Republican, Democrat thing. We can really win influence. And even in these blue states, like Maine, like California, if you start talking to people and you start meeting them where they are, which is, 90% of us are tired of the bullshit. We're tired of the over politicization of everything in our lives, and we don't see anywhere that we can run. And so if we're not going to run, then we have to fight. And we don't want it to be violent. We want it to be peaceful. We want it to be intellectual. We want it to be what our forefathers imagined for us, because we've built a beautiful thing in this country. We've built a beautiful thing here in California, and we are not beyond repair. We are not broken beyond damage. It is in our breaks. It is in our cracks that we are made whole. We just have to be willing enough to look into the darkness, to see the things for what they actually are, bring these things to the light, and then get to work building a really beautiful thing here in California, so that America and the rest of America has a guideline of what's possible. California is uniquely designed to lead in a certain capacity in the direction that we go, which is technology, film, television, agriculture, and this abundance mindset where we reach for the future, we reach for the stars. It's not something that is inherent to every other state. It's inherently Californian. And so what I want to do here with my campaign is I want to not just put America first. I want to put California first. I want to focus on the problems that are unique to Californians, the solutions that are unique here, because I've lived all over the state. Of the 58 counties, I think I've lived in 12 to 14 of them. So Dana, I appreciate the opportunity to address your audience. It was a great time talking to you. I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are mad at me because I haven't done their show, but Dana and I, we hopped on the phone. We had such a great conversation that we decided to hop on and make this happen. And I'm open to doing podcasts now that my kids are back in school. We can make it happen. So I'll be reaching back out to all the people who asked me to be on their podcast, but feel free to reach back out to me. I'm very easy to get a hold of. Appreciate you, Dana.
Thank you so much, David. So the website is serpaforgovernor.com, serpaforgovernor.com. I put that in the comments. And to the viewers, I appreciate you. Beth, one of my favorite viewers, appreciate you so much. Thank you for watching. All of you out there who watch and support me, I appreciate you very much. And please get out, vote for this man, David Serpa, for governor. So stay with me for just a moment, David. All of you out there who are watching, thank you. God bless you. God bless America. This is Dana, the Angry Citizen, signing off for today. Share this widely, please. Everyone in California needs to see this guy and hear what he has to say. So God bless you, America.